Nobody deceives like an addict.
Is the father's criminal record relevant in this investigation?
No, sir.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Today's day 83 since 5-year-old Summer Wells disappeared. In this episode, we're going to deal with the concluding minutes, the last 2 minutes, 23 seconds of the Sermon on the Mount. And during that time, Don says something really weird. In the middle of saying that his worst fear was that someone was being tormented in a dungeon or a basement or something, he then reinforces the point to say, because Summer liked to be outside. She was always outside. But what makes the statement so sinister is Candus's story. In her story, Candus is with Grandma outside, and the boys are in the lounge playing computer games inside, right? Possibly Minecraft, but all of their eyes are glued to the screen. And then what happens? Summer elects not only to go inside, but to go down into the basement alone and play there. Believable? And in their story, that is where Summer is lost, down in the basement. Before we continue with this statement analysis, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment. Thank you to those who have subscribed to the channel in recent days. And let's get started. So at 2 seconds past the 10-minute mark, Don actually seems to be triggered by his own statement. You know, he's talking about the basement or something. Because she loves to be outside. It's the second or third time that he corrects the tense, and he actually signs off on the entire Sermon on the Mount by talking about the past tense, I think the second or third time. So he's very sensitive to that aspect, and he does so with a bit of almost a sneer, almost with sarcasm. Oh, sorry, that I used the past tense again kind of thing. So at 2 seconds past 10 minutes in the statement, he says, she loved, or, you know, she loves kind of thing. And his whole head jerks upward. You really need to watch it a couple of times. I will put a link to this extended version in the description. And after his head jerks upward, his eyes dart to the right towards Candus and then back to the far left as if he's recalling Summer. Now, this is very important just to get a sense of this, because it's going to happen about a minute later in the Sermon on the Mount, right? Don's going to do the same thing again. So get a feeling for what happens, how it happens, and then we're going to see why it happens again. What words are prompting this sort of physical reaction from him, right? This whole idea of loving to be outside, right? Why is he so nervous about that? Also, take note, again, it's that couple of seconds just after the 10-minute mark. Notice how those little muscles just below his eyes can be seen twitching slightly as he makes the statement. If you want to catch this, play 10 minutes and 3 seconds to about 10 minutes and 6 seconds a few times to appreciate the spectrum of nervy micro-expressions going on. Now, I'm going to bring up about 13 other points. The second one is, why do you think it's important to Don that Summer be imagined outside all the time? What was happening inside that might possibly make Don a little nervous? What do you guys think? Let me just say that again. Why do you think it's important to Don that Summer be imagined outside? Not just imagined outside, but imagined outside all the time. She's an outdoor person, right? Except in the story, she ends up going inside into the basement. What happened inside that might possibly make Don a little nervous in the larger scheme of things? That brings us to the third point. What was her downfall? You know, and then Don actually says that was her downfall. How do you know, Don? Don talking about Summer's downfall seems very fatalistic. It seems a very loaded term. And it's as if Don knows something we don't. Do you think he does? If that's true, then
very poor choice of words.
Okay, number 4. When you find yourself in a hole, Don, stop digging. At 10 seconds past the 10-minute mark, immediately after making the "it was her downfall" comment, Don really puts his foot in it. And this is what he says.
downfall, because a lot of times the boys would be inside and we'd be like, "Where's Summer? Why'd you leave her out there alone?"
Don's speaking quite quickly, but what he basically does is he says a lot of times we'd be, and there's quite a big shrug, a swing of the head back to Candus. So he's now trying to get away from we, meaning me and Candus, to the boys. The boys would be inside and we'd be like, "Where's Summer?" Almost like they've come in from outside from somewhere else. "Where's Summer?" What Don was going to say there was that they were all inside and no one knew where Summer was, because she was supposedly outside. Interesting story, Don, but I wonder if it wasn't more likely when Summer wasn't around that she was somewhere inside. Was she being tortured inside, kind of thing?
"Where's Summer? Why'd you leave her out there alone?"
Don seems quite emphatic here during this section of the sermon. He seems quite emotional making these points, doesn't he? Why'd you leave her out there alone? Is that what happened at the swimming hole? Was Summer left out there effectively alone? Number 6 is just to emphasize him saying, "Go get Summer now," and that's happened over and over again.
Go get Summer now, and that's happened over and over again.
What Don reveals here, and this is at about 16 seconds past the 10-minute mark, is that the boys are responsible in his mind for Summer, not himself and not Candus. The over and over again part is likely true as well and may refer to an all too familiar scenario of neglect. "Where's Summer? Go and get Summer," kind of thing. Well, because she's, it's a kind of a situation of not that they necessarily care where Summer is, but her not being around or something happening over and over again. He says those words, "That's happened over and over again." So it suggests that something has gone wrong, something possibly bad has happened over and over again. Well, how does something bad happen over and over again? When you're not paying attention, isn't it?
And I'm so afraid that she's locked away. She's such a loving...
So there's quite an interesting change of sort of direction there, and that is number 7, where Don says, "I'm afraid that she's locked away." In this scenario, Don suggests that Summer may be indoors somewhere. In other words, she's not outside. She's not in the woods. She's not somewhere out there in the Tennessee woods or somehow lying on the landscape. She's indoors. The question is she? To be honest, I'm not sure which is more likely at this point, but the scenario of the West Memphis 3 comes to mind, which is where those children were outside in the Robin Hood Hills, but submerged, but basically outside. And that brings us to point number 8, which kind of confirms what I've just said there, where Don just says the words "love nature." When someone makes a statement about any particular thing, they can choose any words, any story. They can come up with anything. And yet they will gravitate to something for a reason. They can gravitate to anything, but why do they gravitate to those words, this word instead of that word? And so what Don does is he chooses this fairly peculiar combination of words. Loved nature. Is Summer outside somewhere in nature?
Heart and everything, and I'm afraid that she won't be able to, I'm locked away where she can't be outside or play with a puppy or anything. Love nature,
Number 9, that's my greatest fear, is that she can't do any of these things anymore. Now, it's a very weird thing to say. Obviously, if Summer is no longer alive, she can't go outside. She can't play with the puppy, etc. But then the biggest fear isn't that she's locked inside. It's that she's no longer alive. So why not say it? It may well be that in the scheme of things, Don's biggest fear does have to do with where and how Summer is locked away, whatever that actually means. And perhaps he feels tortured by concern about that.
And that's my greatest fear, that she's not able to do any of these things anymore, or that she could possibly, I won't.
At number 10, I don't want to think she's dead. And what is important to do here is look at Don's face, his facial expressions. There does seem to be quite a lot of emotion around that. And that's kind of understandable. But look at where Don's looking at when he says those words. He's looking down towards the ground and slightly towards Candus as well. And that brings us to 6 minutes past 11. There's also a genuinely nervy twitch of the shoulder and head, a nervous glance to the reporter, which is a repeat of that gesture I mentioned earlier, which happens about a minute earlier. Talking about her being in a basement and not wanting to think about that. They're quite big, nervous moments in Don's body language. And what is he talking about? I don't want to think that she's dead.
You know, I don't want to think she's dead.
If you go to 8 seconds past the 11-minute mark, it's easy to miss. But just as Don's talking about thinking something may have happened to Summer in a permanent way, you know, in a really serious way, the camera cuts to Candus and she looks really high-strung. This is in stark contrast to the muted, blank, emotionally numb, slurring lady we've seen over the past 10 minutes. I also think on this fundamental and very significant point, you know, that Summer may not be alive. Her husband is saying these words on camera. Candus doesn't actually say anything. And then there's this look right here, where Candus seems to be saying to Don, what are you doing? There's a sort of look of disbelief on her face. She's not just glancing towards him, you know, her eyes moving to where he is, the way that she's been looking at him throughout the entire interview. At this point, she turns her face to look him full in the face. She's almost got to turn slightly backwards so that she can do that. And then they make eye contact. And, you know, in the one moment she appears baffled by what he's saying. The next she seems like blown away by Don, by what he's saying. As if she's saying, what are you doing, you know? Then, as soon as they've made eye contact, Don immediately backtracks, as if he's taking his cue from Candus. So that's number 12. After a glance seems to pass between the pair at 11:12, Don seems to get the memo and reverts to the safe terrain of storytelling, saying, I don't want to focus on the negativity. He sort of backtracks and goes back to the sort of safer ground. Now, one thing that I would suggest you do is try and play the video. And as I say, there's a link to the extended version in the description. Play that side by side as I go through these points, and then you get the real value out of it. Then number 13, and we're coming right to the very end of the Sermon on the Mount, Candus spends less than 20 seconds talking about her sister Rose. Now, once again, she can talk about anything. She can choose any words she wants to choose. And then she actually elects between 28 seconds past the 11-minute mark and 46 seconds to talk about her sister. So it's less than 20 seconds. She spends less than 20 seconds talking about her sister. And basically, in that time, not giving information, but I won't say withholding, but basically not revealing very much. She basically says she doesn't know very much about her sister's disappearance. She doesn't know what happened. She doesn't really volunteer anything. And she says she was between states. You know, that is where she was. She was on the move. But interestingly, so was her sister by the looks of things. Her sister was on the way somewhere. Her sister was on the road in her car when she disappeared. That brings us to number 14. Is this the biggest reveal of all? When Rosemary Bly's disappearance comes up, Don jumps in, saying at 11:48.
No, there's nothing. She disappeared without a trace. They haven't found anything, haven't found a body, nothing. And
you also want to pay attention to Don's face when he says these words. He also talks about they haven't found remains. And when you see cases like that, that's why I lose hope on Summer. I want to keep up, but sometimes I just, and Candus says, you just lose it. Now think of those words with regard to Summer. You just lose it. I must say those words where Don says something about, they haven't found anything, but he seems to want to keep saying the words nothing. He says something like, there's nothing, right? That is exactly what Chris Watts said during the sermon on the porch.
And then walked in the house and nothing. It's vanished. Nothing was here.
Now, those words nothing may to us seem quite harmless, as though he's saying nothing, there's nothing here. But think about it from the perspective of evidence and removing evidence. We know that that is what Chris Watts did. And isn't that what you're thinking in terms of the criminal psychology? You're trying to leave nothing behind, no traces. And when you actually watch the Sermon on the Porch, and this is at about 15 seconds past the minute mark, I'll put a link to that in the description as well, you can see a faintly disguised sense of duping delight from Chris Watts. He seems to be quite happy, quite proud, quite kind of smiling about the fact that nothing was found. And it's true, there was very little found inside the house, but that's by design. That is because it was covered up. Does that make sense? And so what I'm doing is I'm comparing the use of this word nothing in the sense of related to someone who's missing, to the Summer Wells case. Do you think it's relevant? So I'm not going to take it further than that. I might follow this up with a examination of what Candus and Don were likely asked during the polygraph. So look out for that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.